blasting it out, and if I can prove it too, I can show the documentation on my site from 2016 that for the days leading up to Bowie's death on January 10th, he was all over my posts. He was on my mind heavily, and I didn't even know about the album Black Star. I hadn't heard it yet. I didn't even hear it till after the announcement of his passing. So then it was the Man Who Fell to Earth role, the role as Thomas Jerome Newton, which, by the way, is 233 English ordinal, same as the Lord Jesus Christ and John Fitzgerald Kennedy, all equaling 233, which is one of the Fibonacci numbers. So I don't know why I'm on a second. I had to do it. Why the video stopped just now. Maybe I accidentally pressed stop. I don't know, because I was going to be continually going, and so I'm on 181 now. Hopefully 181 will be, I can get through all, how many pages? This is very short, as you can see. It's 45 pages, or is it 46? Oh my goodness, it's 47. If it's 47, Diane, I might shit my pants a little bit. It is 47, and I'm not shitting my pants a little bit, but it's 47 pages, Diane. I wish the camera wouldn't do that on me. Jeez. 47, Diane. So I'm kind of confident I can do this right now. It would be easier for me just to place the camera down and sit down and read it, and you be watching me read, but I personally think this is better for watching as a presentation. So I asked him what happened on his adventure, and he told me about that Christmas when he sang his duet with David Bowie. Yeah, okay, I got to that point. What was the last thing he said to you when you had to say goodbye? He told me, David Bowie said, "I'm always afraid as well, but this is how you can feel brave in the world." And then it was over. David Bowie said, "I'm always afraid as well, but this is how you can feel brave in the world." And then it was over. I've never forgotten it, and years later I cried when I heard he had passed. My friend was surprised. I was delighted by this tale. The normal reaction is, that's just a stupid story, fancy believing in an invisible mask. But I do. I really believe in it, and it's the very best story I've heard all year. When I was 9, I sang with a duet with David Bowie. It's true, it was almost Christmas in London, and I met David Bowie and we sang. I remember it was nearly Christmas because Grandma and I took the train up to London, and it was cold and windy and all the leaves were down. There were decorated trees in the windows, tinsel and stars. The air smelled smoky and maybe a bit like it was going to snow. I'd won a competition. I never usually went in for anything like that. People like us never win things, Grandma said. People like us, who will answer the telephone? True stories, David Byrne. John Goodman singing. It's all just the luck of the draw, says Grandma, and we're hopeless. But this time I had, and this time it mattered because it was a competition to do with a movie I really loved. You know the one with the king of the goblins. It had come out the year before when I was 8, and I still loved it. I'd seen it more than once. I had the book and the record. I knew all the words. I loved to sing, but only by myself. Sometimes I recorded myself singing and telling stories. When I was 9, I had one of those huge ghetto blasters. It was almost as big as I was. It had 2 speakers and bits that lit up and graphic equalizers, whatever they were. I used to love to record things, and I would make mixtapes for myself. "Don't you dare go recording me," Grandma shouted. "Don't you dare go bugging me in my own home." Why are we upside down? What's going on here, Diane? I think there's flux capacitor is kind of conspiring against me or something right now. I don't know. I don't think it wants me doing this. It's trying to stop me. I think it is, Diane, because what we're doing with this flux dispersal is we're bridging 1957 and 2022. And it appears that there's an obdurate quality to time where the past doesn't want to be changed. And the fact that we're signaling to it is it's pushing back and attempting to stop this from happening. So let's hope we can get through this. Do our best here, okay? We'll just keep pressing on, even if we're afraid. I'm going to see if I can use two hands to hold the camera, because I can hold it steadier that way. I really hope you're not upside down right now. I mean, you're right side up to me, but now the focus is out. What in the fuck? I don't know if this is upside down, Diane, but I'm not going to do the rest of this way. I'm just going to put the camera on me and read to you. Is that okay? Is that okay with you? Because it's too hard. I want to do this. I want to read this, but I think it's better if I just put the camera on me right now. And actually, let's go. Do you want to go to Studio B? No, you want to just stay in here? I'll sit at that chair over there, okay? No, it'll be better if I sit here because of the light. Let's see what the lighting looks like here. That's fine. Let's see. Will the obdurate past stop us? I don't know. What's with the life preserver? Well, it's this god-awful weather out there. It's not a life preserver, it's a vest. It's something, you don't have them back in 57, but yet. But see, look, they're actually quite good for, you can get them in different colors, but I like black. I'm black. And I'm ketchup. So Grandma says, the grandma obviously is the bad cop of the grandparents to take care of him. Why would I want to record her, though? Grandma was interested in fashion. Fashion. She loved to go into town and buy new clothes. They'd be clothes that were slightly too young for her. That's what Grandpa said. Look at you. You look like a fat Cher. This is not a Fiji advertisement. This is the sending of the idea of Fiji to the Truman Show creators. Because what do you think you're watching right now, Diane, Dana, Scully? On the day we went to London, the day of the special screening, Grandma was wearing her pink coat. It was her favorite thing in the whole world, her pink coat. She also wore a colorful handkerchief, headscarf, and spiky high-heeled boots. I don't need the life preserver on right now. I'm not gonna sink, even though the inflatable life raft looks like it's gonna pop any moment. The inflatable life raft here in the 2022 economic. So, yeah, you guys in 57 are fucking lucky. I mean, well, whatever. It's gonna lead to this anyway, so it's just a part of the chain, the continuum. Yeah, you only have to pay like pennies for fucking ice cream and shit, but even though it tastes better back then, it's still fucking poisonous for it, It's better. Everything tastes better, that's for sure back then. You not everything's fucking ground up and glyphosate but the geoengineering, however, is starting to toxify everything already in your time, because they already started it in the 40s, and they were even fucking starting to do all experiments with weather modification in the 1920s with just shortly after flight was invented. It's what Thoreau said in the 19th century. Hopefully, man never gets into the air because he'll lay waste to the sky like he has to the earth. And look what's happened. Look up. On the day we went to London, the day of the special screening, Grandma was wearing her pink fur coat. It was her favorite thing in the whole world. She also wore a colorful headscarf and spiky high-heeled boots. On that day, I was wearing a white shirt, a red V-necked jumper, and check trousers. It was more or less what I always wore, but that day I was extra smart because we were going to London to be with the other competition winners, and some of the stars of the movie were going to be there as well. Most of them were puppets, but the big star of the show was David Bowie, and he was actually going to be there. Ha, him, Grandma said. He's a flash in the pan. He's overrated. Who cares about him? She didn't think David Bowie was anything special, but I did. And Grandpa did. I loved Grandpa. We did everything together. He used to buy me books. He understood about David Bowie and the film in which he was the Goblin King. When the letter came and I found out I'd won, I dreamed that David Bowie would take me away just before Christmas, far away to the land of the goblins and away from Grandma and Grandpa. But I didn't want to leave Grandpa. You're not the only winner, Grandma said. Lots of kids must have won prizes. If it's a film show, then they've given out loads of tickets, haven't they? Hardly makes it special. But it did, I thought. It was just before Christmas in London, and David Bowie was going to meet us there. We caught the train. It was one of the old-fashioned ones that you don't see anymore, with the separate little compartments. I was so excited. I was so excited that I sang all the way there. I sang Greensleeves because it was my favorite song. That horrible racket you're making is giving me a ghastly headache, Grandma cried, tying her handkerchief even tighter. Shut up! I hadn't even realized I was singing in front of her. I'd forgotten I wasn't alone with my ghetto blaster. That's how happy I was. I didn't even much mind the crowds at the railway station when we arrived. Well, not too much anyway. That kind of thing usually bothered me pretty badly. I hated being around a lot of people. I kept looking at the time. Grandma, we're going to be late. She was queuing to buy a newspaper. Shush, she frowned. She didn't like to walk fast. She hated hurrying anywhere. She thought dashing about was common. So we always ambled everywhere. But that was no good today with the special film starting at a set time. If we got there late to the place, they might even refuse to let us in. If it had already begun. These were the thoughts going through my head as she took out the letter and looked frowningly at the directions, and we headed to the underground station. I was struggling a bit with my ghetto blaster, especially on the escalators. Grandma said, I don't even want to be here. I don't want to see that silly film again. The only reason I'm even here is because your grandpa isn't well and he insisted. Also, he had offered to buy our ticket, and he had given Grandma the money for a new posh frock for Christmas. But I didn't point that out because I didn't want her to lose her temper. This is a 9-year-old, by the way, in case you didn't remember. It seemed to take about 1,000,000 years to get to the place. We went on a tube train and then a red bus, and we almost got lost, and Grandma was getting angry. It was freezing and starting to snow. The ground was pretty icy underfoot. I stared at it as we walked along. It was a funny kind of frost, glittery. And the snow was starting to fall. It was almost silver, wasn't it? Why can't this thing be somewhere centrally located? Grandma was just about gnashing her teeth. How am I ever going to make it to the shops in time afterward? She trod on my foot as we went down the high street of some place I didn't recognize. I didn't make a fuss, even though she was in her spiky-heeled boots. It really hurt, actually. When we got to the place eventually, it didn't look like the right kind of building at all. It looked like an old school, Grandma. It looks like an old school, Grandma said, and she was right. It was old-fashioned with turrets and tall windows and metal fences all around. The place was open even though it was a Saturday, and we had to cross a schoolyard to get to the main doors. It was like a very fancy type of school. Is this where the special screening is? She asked the man on the main door, showing him the letter I'd been sent by the competition people. She always put on a very haughty voice when talking to strangers. The man was in a suit and he looked down at the letter carefully, then studied his clipboard. "I'm afraid you're rather late," he said. My heart started hammering because I thought he was going to say we'd missed everything and we would have to turn around and go home. "Well, that can't be helped," said Grandma. "It's okay," said the man, and ushered us into the building. The corridors were dark and wooden-floored. Behind a tall set of doors, there was a large hall filled with kids and noise. He opened the doors a little crack, and we could see them all lit up by the giant screen. The film had started, and it was playing very boomingly. I knew the story well. We hadn't missed much. The King of the Goblins hadn't even come on yet. But I'd missed the theme song, though, and that was a bit I really loved. The man whispered to us that we could find seats right at the back. Would we be all right? Grandma rolled her eyes and led the way into the noisy room. We found seats next to some other parents and kids at the back, and they barely glanced at us as we sat down. Grandma made me feel that everyone was looking at us, making a show of ourselves by coming in late. We sat down and started concentrating on the film, the most wonderful film in the world. I felt rather than heard Grandma sigh. How many kids were there? It seemed like hundreds. It really sounded like hundreds when they started yelling and shouting out at the exciting bits. It was all quite noisy, and that spoiled it a bit for me, but I stayed where I was. I wasn't going to miss any of this. The film rolled on, brilliantly, sparklingly, wonderfully, just like it had the first 3 times I saw it. 4th. There was something different. Was it a clearer picture, perhaps? It seemed like all the scenes in the land of the Goblin King were covered in glitter. The whole screen was twinkling and glittering throughout. I wasn't sure it had been like that the other times I'd watched the movie. And then I was sucked into the story again. I mouthed the words to the songs under my breath. I reached under my seat to press record on my ghetto blaster, and when one side of my C90 ran out, I turned it over. Grandma tutted at my wriggling about in my seat. And at last the movie finished. The house lights came up and everyone was cheering. Absolute twaddle, Grandma said, and pulled her headscarf back on and tied it tight. Absolute twaddle. Absolute twaddle. So excited, Harry. They had puppets there. Diane. Black Star. I'm a Black Star. The actual puppets from the film. There were puppet experts and special effects guys. There was a bit of a crush at the front of the hall with all the kids shoving in to see. From where we were, you couldn't see all that much, just the tops of the biggest puppets' heads. There were squeals and shrieks of delight, though, as the puppeteers made them do stuff. Move about and blink their eyes and shake their limbs. The doors opened and even more puppets came in. Goblins and monsters, trolls, and the cute dog. They were mobbed by the competition winners. "It's pandemonium in here," Grandma complained to the adults nearest her. Her voice became rather shrill. "Those kids are going wild. Can't someone get them under better control? My grandson is very sensitive and withdrawn. He can't stand to be around things like this." I felt ashamed that she was telling people about me, so I just stared at the shiny wooden floor and my tape deck. And that's how I missed the moment when the doors opened again and David Bowie walked in. But I heard the huge whooping cheer that went up and the screams from the kids and some of the grown-ups. I could hear his voice shouting hello to everyone, but I couldn't see him. "There he is," Grandma jabbed me. "You should look up and see. That's who you came for, isn't it? The great big star of the show. Stop looking at the floor and look. You're just as good and deserving as anyone else here." But at first I couldn't look up. When I did sneak a look, I saw that David Bowie was swamped by children. They had gathered round him, and he was at the center of a hurricane of kids and puppets. He was signing posters and records for everyone. Then, all of a sudden, Diane, where did I put Fiji water? Oh, here it is. In case I don't see you. Good day. Good evening. Good evening. Okay, when I did sneak a look, I saw that David Bowie was swamped by children. Hurricane of kids and puppets. He was signing posters and records for everyone. Then all of a sudden, that man in the suit was standing with us. He tapped my grandma on the shoulder and addressed her by name. "Yes," she frowned. "You're to follow me," he said mysteriously. Grandma grabbed my hand and dragged me away from the fringes of the noisy crowd. We left the hall and followed the man down a corridor. Grandma's, again, in case you're just tuning in, which I don't see how that could be here, but anyway, it's Stardust and Snow by Paul Magrs. Maggers. I don't want to be disrespectful and mispronounce it. It looks like it's probably Maggers. And if you want to know the story of how this book found me yesterday, it's in my earlier videos today and my videos yesterday. We've reached a crucial juncture here, Dana Scully. "You're to follow me," he said mysteriously. Grandma grabbed my hand and dragged me away from the fringes of that noisy crowd. We left the hall and followed the man down a corridor. Grandma's sharp footsteps were really noisy. Had we done something wrong? They'd seen me recording on my ghetto blaster. Maybe it wasn't allowed. It felt like we were in trouble. When the man opened another door and sent us into a smaller room behind the main hall. It was mostly bare, apart from some chairs, gym equipment, and an old upright piano. "You're to wait here," he said, not smiling. "Why?" Grandma demanded. "You're the party who wrote in, aren't you? You're the party who wrote in, aren't you?" said the man in the suit. "About the boy?" Grandma glanced at me and then glared at him. It was his grandpa who wrote in, as you put it. His grandpa wasn't well enough to come here today with the boy, and so I'm here instead. I've no idea what the old man said in his letter. "I see," said the man. He looked at me and said, sounding more kindly this time, "Well, you're to stay here, at Mr. Bowie's own request. You won't have to wait long." "I should jolly well hope not," said Grandma, watching him leave. I should jolly well hope not. "Richard, have you seen my new 6-piece dining set? We will not walk fast, we will amble." There were then we were alone in this side room. She went to sit on a plastic chair in the corner of the room. She took a flask out of her. I gotta make sure this is recording, Diane, because, like I said, the past is obdurate and it doesn't want this to be happening. It's trying to stop us from doing what we got to do, which is fluxing. Doesn't want to change, Diane. It doesn't want to change, and it doesn't want this. It doesn't want. It doesn't want. It doesn't want anyone messing around. Time. What is it? Do we know really? It's actually. It looks to me to be an entity of some sort, or a. Yes, a. Tim E. Saturn, Cronus, leader of the Titans. I see, said the man. He looked so. I should really. Then we were alone in the side room. She went to sit on a plastic chair in the corner of the room. She took a flask out of her shopping bag and carefully poured herself a cup of tea. She sat drinking this noisily, smacking her lips. Then she took out her Daily Mail and started reading it. She didn't remove her headscarf. Page 24. I set down my ghetto blaster in the middle of the shiny floor and just stood there waiting. I wasn't even sure what I was waiting for. At Mr. Bowie's own request, maybe I really had done wrong by recording the film on my ghetto blaster. I took out the tape and swapped it for a blank one from my satchel. Luckily, I always carried a supply. What, was I really in trouble? There was a lot of noise coming from the main hall. Black Star. If they don't get a move on soon, we shall have to go, Grandma said loudly. I think they must have forgotten all about us. Really, it's not good enough. They have no right to get a young boy's hopes up. Just as she was talking, the door flew open and David Bowie walked into the room. I stared at him. I gasped and held my breath. He was in a silk pirate shirt and tight blue trousers. He was dressed like he was on the screen when he was the Goblin King. You're Daniel, aren't you? He grinned at me. I stared at his jagged teeth. Then David Bowie was striding over to Grandma. You must be Grandma, he said, and confidently held out his hand. She looked at him and at his hand, and she didn't shake it. She became flustered and went back inside her newspaper. I cringed inside. I couldn't believe she was being so rude. But nothing ruffled David Bowie. Nothing ruffled David Bowie. He just shrugged and turned away, leaving her to the Daily Mail. He strolled back over to me, and I looked down quickly at the floor. Are you him? He asked. Are you the one? You are, aren't you? I couldn't look up at David Bowie. I was so embarrassed about my grandma. I heard the rustle of her newspaper again. I heard her slurp her tea and tut loudly. Then David Bowie sat down on the floor. He sat down cross-legged right in front of me so that I was looking down at him. There he was. One eye was slightly different to the other. One of them had a bigger pupil than the other one. His hair was cut shorter than it had been in the film. But maybe that had been a wig anyway. He smelled nice. He smelled of soft ice cream. Vanilla. Or is it sandalwood? Probably sandalwood, I would imagine. Vanilla. That's what it was. I swear to you, I did not read that. Go ahead and read that line. This is, by the way, BTW. This is my first time reading this. Okay, I'm with you right now. If you haven't read them, unless you've read it already, and you're. But I hadn't even. As I said in my previous videos, I didn't even know this book existed before yesterday when it found me. And again, if you want to hear that story, watch my videos from earlier. If you want to know how I got to now, you gotta go back to then, like we're doing, going back to the 1950s to get to 1949, going back in time. Vanilla, that's what it was. You've got green eyes, he said, looking straight at me. You've got green eyes. Yes, I said. That's quite special, that. You must be part wizard. He was looking straight at me as he said this. I'm not going to get verklempt, Diane. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to turn into Andy again. Android. Anthro. Polymorphism. Anthropology. Apology? Apology? No one ever did that. He was looking straight at me as he said this. That you must be part wizard. No one ever did that. Your grandpa wrote me a letter, Daniel. I don't know how he found out how to write to me or where to send it, but he did. Quite possibly it was magic. Does he do magic, your grandpa? No, but he's nice. Well, he wrote to me and said, Mr. Bowie, please look after my grandson, Daniel, as your special Christmas film show, because I'm not able to be there. Daniel doesn't like big crowds and everyone being noisy and rowdy. Also, he can get a bit shy and withdrawn. Not everyone understands him, and he's had a bit of bother with bullies in the past and things like that. Not going to get verklempt, Diane. So he might need a special quiet moment to himself. That's what he told me. Is that right, Daniel? I nodded. I like the sound of your grandpa, said David Bowie. Then David Bowie gasped. Is that a ghetto blaster? Is this yours? Do you record things? I nodded. Stories, sometimes songs. Do you sing? I shook my head. Your grandpa told me you liked to sing. Then David Bowie was reaching out and dragging my ghetto blaster towards him. Look at this. It's got graphic equalizers and everything. Whatever they are.